Hello, everybody. So let me introduce this new roundtable titled Can Man-Made Fibers and Leather Alternatives Be Sustainable? And to try to answer this question, I am with Lee, Timothy, and Samantha. Unfortunately, we have two cancellations, but we have great speakers, so maybe you can introduce yourself.
How's that?
Yeah, it should work.
Okay, so good morning all. My name is Lien van der Schuren. I'm working for Synthétiques, and Synthétiques is a research and technical center located in Belgium and with a focus on textile materials. If you look to our activities at Synthétiques, of course, the research is one of the most important things we are doing, but next to that, we also do a lot of testing on all kinds of textile materials. Myself, I'm a materials and textiles engineer working for Synthétiques for 11 years almost, and being involved in quite some research projects and now also in the project management of some projects related to, for example, the use of alternatives compared to the fossil-based materials.
Thank you. Timothy?
Morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to this roundtable. Great meeting you. So my name is Timothée Boitouzet. So I'm a founder of Voodoo, which is a new material startup that I founded like 6 years ago. We primarily work on advanced materials to decarbonize the industry. One of this material is a vegan leather. So basically, all our material technologies are based on the molecular modification of wood in order to provide it with new properties. So basically we have three materials. We can render wood transparent, we can render wood hyper flexible. This is what we are going to talk about from my side today. And wood that we can make extremely strong as steel. So we are based in Paris. We have factories in the east of France, and we have recently raised an important fundraising round in order to industrialize our process and take it to market. Personally, I'm trained as an architect. I started my education in Japan, and then I quit architecture and moved to chemistry at Harvard and MIT. To actually work on materials that will help, save us from climate change. So great meeting you all, and we hope you'll have a great time.
Thank you. Samantha?
Yeah, hi there. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for coming today. My name's Samantha Muro, and I'm founder of Planet of the Grapes. Planet of the Grapes is a company where we are taking the grape waste from my local vineyards down in the south of France, taking the agricultural waste and converting that into a plant leather for the fashion industry and lifestyle industries as well. And as part of my background, I've been in the industry, in and out of the industry for probably about 25 years, starting off as a fashion buyer for Topshop based in London. But just to give some kind of perspective on that, it was a totally different landscape to what we have today in the high street. We were there, we had 250 stores in the UK, we had Oxford Circus, which was a destination point for fashion, and it's when fashion was really great fun and creative. But obviously over those years we've seen this change happening, and that's how we got into fast fashion today. And I suppose coming back around into it, because I have been out of the industry, but came back into it as a real passion for change and to absolutely move away from where we've got to today. So hence bringing in this new grape leather. So we're working on that now with vignerons, chemists and designers.
Thank you. So my first question is, in terms of biodegradability, which man-made materials can compete with skins and wool? And what about the product life cycle and recycling issues? Maybe Samantha, you can start.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you. Biodegradability, I think that's a really interesting subject. It's very new. And it's an avenue that many people, or a few people, are starting to look at today. We've looked at biodegradability, and it's something that we're looking at for our grape leather. And when we first started, that was a big part of the whole circular story. And pre the finishes, our material does biodegrade. I've tried it, I put it in the soil when it was really, really raining, and it biodegraded. The problem is, though, is that we also want to create a material that's going to last longer as well. And that's the conflict right now. Do you want something that's going to last longer, because also that's great for the planet, versus being biodegradable? So we're kind of looking at both of those right now, but today our priority is actually to make it last longer. But there are some really great materials coming through for biodegradability, and I think that's one way to make clothes last longer, and also recycling if it's done correctly, and generally, guess buying less, but we'll come into that later on as well.
Thank you. Lynn?
Yes, so I will talk from the textile side, not from the leathers. So if you look to textiles and the biodegradability, it's also something which is upcoming because, for example, with the microfibers which are released during washing or during the wearing, this is a great issue and something which needs to be solved. And within this, the man-made cellulosics have a great potential because these are biodegradable. Of course, we have to take into account that a lot of textiles have some after-treatments, some finishes, some dyes which are there, and also these have to be biodegradable and not give any harm to the environment. Next to that, you also have some synthetic biopolymers, which are not made from fossil-based resources, but from natural resources. Some of them are biodegradable, but they still need some development to be able to use them for a real garment, a real fashion item.
Okay, yes. It's clear. Timothée?
So it's important, I'm sure it's very clear for all of you, but recycling, compostability, recyclability are completely different concepts. So, and what you said is very interesting. At the same time, we want the material to be able to disappear under certain conditions, but to last longer as well. And this triggers at the, chemical level, molecular engineering of the material, a very different way you will trigger this or this property. So you can have a material that's recyclable, but not obviously biodegradable or compostable. So the material that we have developed is biodegradable under certain conditions. Wood is biodegradable. The resin that we impregnate the material with is 100% bio-based and also biodegradable. So, so this is precisely what we are working on.
If I may just add, because I know there is some misunderstanding about the biodegradability, it's always important to mention in which environment the material is biodegradable, because it can biodegrade in an industrial composting condition, which is completely different to biodegradation in, for example, seawater, if we have the microfibers which are being released. So it's important to always mention in which environment the biodegradation is going on. Yeah.
Thank you for this precision. Given the environmental impacts of animal materials that can be inequally polluting depending on the methods, right? And those of certain synthetic materials, do you think that vegan fashion is an ecological solution?
So, sorry, vegan fashion doesn't mean anything because you have different vegan leather. You have vegan leather that are like 5% bio-based and all the rest is like petrochemicals. You have other materials that are really respectful to the environment and doing a great job. So vegan leather, either it's a technology or it's a trend. So you have to push it in the right direction. Otherwise, it's just marketing and communication and bullshit, if I can say it as I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'll pick you up on that point. Might not use all your vocabulary, but I agree. Yeah, and I think for our grape leather alternative, I think choosing your words is key. And one thing is that we've gone out there, and I don't actually specifically want to call it a vegan leather because I think it's becoming quite controversial. And there's such a split between the animal leather industry versus the vegan leather industry. And to be honest, I think we're on a traction to create new leathers that are better for the planet and the people that we're working with. And I don't necessarily want to get into that argument. So from our point of view, we're deciding not to use it.
Okay. So any things to add? No?
Maybe one quick comment. It's very easy to see what's the environmental benefit from a material compared to another. This is called the life cycle analysis. So every time that you have a material, you can compare it apple to what you want to replace. And also you have a kind of scientific / engineering way to analyze the material from every input and until the gate, so the exit of your factory. So it's fairly easy to measure if a material is performant or not, regardless of is it vegan or not vegan.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, no, I was going to pick up on you and what you were saying there as well. And I think the whole measuring is really, really important because we have had some tools to measure, but they haven't necessarily been correct and sincere to the business. So I think this is one way forward, that to do proper comparisons, absolutely measuring it is really needed. If it is the water usage, carbon, methane, can it be returned to the soil? What's it going to do to the soil? All of these things are really, really key, but we really need the metrics to have a true, honest comparison rather than kind of just, you're using plastic, we're not, kind of thing. I think that's too easy an argument, when in fact it's a lot harder and we need to actually go down that avenue and play with the figures correctly.
Yeah. Which material do you think are really interesting for the future of fashion and why? I guess both of you have an idea on this question.
Yeah, okay, so, well, yeah, I guess one obvious one would be like plant leathers, for sure. New leathers, new materials. The word leather we know is very controversial. But if we're coming up with a leather alternative, there's no specific word for that right now, but I think we can all kind of understand something that's not using an animal. So these new kind of materials coming through, I think they're extremely interesting. I also actually think going back, looking at natural fibres is really interesting as well in terms of the based fibres. Because right now, if we're using kind of 60% of polyester in the industry right now, the fibre basket's too small. We've got so many polyester makes, polycottons, when really we've got some beautiful like rammies, we've got nettle, we've got flax, all these other wonderful materials that we used a long, long time ago. And I think we should start looking at that again, but not getting excessive about it all, but certainly starting to reintroduce those again. And I think that's a really interesting part for the future as well.
Thank you.
We are talking about performance a lot here, but aesthetics is also important. So I'm going to make a link with this, because when you talk to, for instance, all the customers that we have interactions with in the so well-known luxury maison or industries, they are looking to reduce their carbon emissions, but also to differentiate themselves from their competitors. So the idea that a material would be extremely great for the environment but look crappy, it won't help the sales process anyways. So you have to play with both aspects. If you want to sell it, it has to be good looking, good for the environment, good properties as well. So this is part of the future of this industry, especially, and of course, having, you know, leather itself is a great material. This is why we have been using it for thousands of years. But facing the current environmental crisis that we have to reduce the amount of water, reduce the amount of emissions, while having a distinctive look, which is also very important. So a lot of alternative leather, they want to look like leather, you know? And this is completely a mistake to me, because you have to enhance how your material embodies how it's different in terms of both. It doesn't have to look like something it wants to replace. So, so yes, this is super important for the future of these applications.
Actually, it's about creating a new aesthetic, and we know that people are often ready to adopt new vision of what is beautiful or not. Through the centuries, we have seen very different kind of ideal feminine beauty. So it could be the same for the leather. Why not? Yes, Lee.
Yeah, and I think it also counts for the fashion, for the textiles. Also there are some alternatives on the market, but we also have to be ready to use them and to be aware of that we will have to make some changes, for example, in the design, in the use of some more non-wovens even for clothing, because non-wovens need shorter fibers, which are typically coming from the mechanical recycling process and which are now difficult to use. And if you then look to the most interesting materials or the most promising materials, I think on the one hand, recycled materials, the standard polyester cotton, which is being recycled, can be very interesting. And there are lots of emerging recycling technologies upcoming, which can help us to get the recycled materials into the market more. Also easier to adapt because we know these materials, we know the polyester, we know the cotton. Next to that, we of course also have the bio-based alternatives, but for that we will need to make some changes to our processes, to what we expect from the design, from the properties.
Okay, let's jump to another question. To what extent do you think that bio-manufactured materials will be able to impose themselves in the brand mix in terms of material sourcing in the years to come? Regarding this question, each year the Institut Français de la Mode, IFM, is publishing a big study about consuming habits in France, and it's always highlighting the fact that people are choosing, the first criteria driving the purchase is always aesthetic. So you were right to mention this specific point, because since the final consumer is asking for aesthetic product and the style is the first leitmotiv, I guess brands have the same consideration. And years after years, we see another criteria coming is the environmental impacts, and especially for young generation. So regarding all those elements, what would be your opinion about this question?
No, I think you're totally right. From what we're seeing as well with our grape leather right now, we want it to look really pleasing to the eye, and that kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning as well, and picking up on your points, that the whole bringing back, fueling creativity is so important. And if that does mean you've got a beautiful looking material and it's good for environmentally and socially, that is all plus, plus, plus. And I think that's exactly where we're aiming for. So that's definitely really, really key. And then I guess so from more like environmental aspects, from the biomaterials where they're going to take place, we can see that's already increasing slowly. It's a real start of the industry right now in this area. And I think investment is really key in this area. And I think also collaboration is really key to get it absolutely growing. I saw today that a big company, Bolt Threads, has just lost investment the next round. And that makes an industry nervous. So that's not really helping the cause. So really do need brands, designers to come on here and get investment to help push it forward. And then I think it really will get going. It's really important for the future.
Obviously. Thank you. Yes.
Yes, I think if you look to the textiles and the fashion, you of course have the man-made cellulosics, which are upcoming a lot and which are already in use at the moment. I think the disadvantage there is that now they are mostly wood pulp based, so they are taking trees down to make the man-made cellulosics, but they're developing a lot and working a lot to find alternatives which are not wood, but which are, for example, leftovers from the agriculture that can be used like a straw. You see an example actually there from one of the projects we are running, where we have a straw-based cellulose material. So these are really interesting, and I think these will become also really important. But it will require some further research, some further investments as well to get this going.
Okay.
And So for those alternatives to impose themselves on the market, there is something super important that we forget is price. If they are cheaper and the luxury brand can improve their margin profile and it looks better and it performs better and it's greater for the environment, obviously they will choose this material. So it's not because you know, our customers are luxury companies that they don't care about money. It's the absolute opposite. So that's why they have great margin profiles. So at present, leather alternatives and traditional leather, it's like a factor of 2 or 3x at scale at present. And this is also why companies like Ball Threads that have been doing an amazing job at bringing to the market this new mycelium leather, especially with Stella McCartney and other brands. The cost at scale wasn't really there. So for the maison or the brand, there are two possibilities. Either they use this alternative material as a capsule, like you know, for marketing purposes, maybe 1,000 handbags to have a foot in this new world of sustainability, and they use a crocodile and a regular leather on the other side. But the switch has to be done on the price profile. Otherwise, this would never happen. Another thing, we talk about the final client and the final customer, but also the companies that will manufacture a handbag, for instance, or a wallet with an alternative leather, has to work hand in hand with the startup or the innovative company, because you don't work with the material the same way you would work with leather. And we've had this problem in the past, like so working with industrials, converting the material into the final object, and they were not used to how it would behave. So we had to work a lot to accompany them and to help them pass all the hurdles they had. So.
Yeah, and if I could pick up on that point, I think that's really important. It definitely is kind of the hand-holding and the collaboration with the brands. And that does mean going through working with specific factories, working with people who know how to work your materials, just to give that confidence in how it performs and to show that you can get something to stitch this beautifully, to glue, to paint, edge paint. If you're there to help and you're selecting the people who can make that as well, it really, really helps, because otherwise people are very nervous. And if we've got to get out there, we've got to get things to market fast, 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 that's what we're used to. But in fact, we've got to stand back and say this is going to take time. And we've got to, I guess, manage expectations in that front, from the brand's point of view, from our point of view, from the customer's point of view. Because so much, we've seen so much marketing of new materials that's coming out, it's here, and then it doesn't get there. So then everyone gets nervous again about the market. So it's definitely, everyone, we've got to understand it will take time. Leather's been around for thousands of years. This is all very, very new. So hence the whole need to really collaborate and work on it, taking time to do it correctly.
Yeah, maybe if I can add, so also the use of, for example, bio-based polymers instead of the currently used fossil-based polyesters is also something which will take time, because at the moment the cost of these biopolymers is 3 times higher or even 10 times higher than what's currently being used. So you will have to start with some niche applications showing that it's possible, getting the attention, and hopefully this will then give some investments and some increase of production capacity, which will then decrease the cost of the raw materials. But it will be needed.
Yes, so first let's motive the price, the aesthetic of the products, and the capacity. And this specific point make me think about another startups, Pili, who's trying to dye textile with bacteria. And of course, it's very difficult to industrialize such a new way to dye fabrics, because everything has to be reinvented. So it's necessary to invest on the long run to develop such a technology at an industrial scale. So I guess your first point about investment is really key in most cases. Because if you want for instance, your alternative to compete with the very established other alternative, of course, you need money to fill the gap and go and fill the demand. And also when we see the huge amount which is invested even in the cotton industry, for instance, in the United States. So it would be fair to also get such an amount invested to develop new alternatives with new technologies, right? So my last question is, are the finishing steps equivalent in terms of both social and environmental impacts for leathers and alternative materials? I could have asked the question also for fibers, but it's true that you automatically have to think about the wool process differently when you are coming from a different base. What would be the main difference in your case, for instance?
The finishing process?
Yes.
How you make the material soft?
I was specifically thinking about the les après, you know, the different stages to finish, to give the final appearance to your products, because they are always very much implicated in the impact, the final impact of the product you're selling.
Of course. So when you're developing, like in our case, a new product, you try not to have a lot of product offering. Like for our leather alternative, we have one wood species, one color, one finishing. Because you can't extrapolate, and we can tweak the color and make other colors with bio-based inks and the finishing process, but we try to stick to a limited limited options. One thing about the financing that you were mentioning, and it links to this question as well. It's about really understanding what is the pain point of your client. Because to raise cash, you need to show traction, and to show traction, you need to have a particular attention to your customer and perfectly understand what they want. So we have the finishing that we have in our material answers 80% of demand that we have received. So instead of diversifying into a lot of different finishes, we want to do this great because it answers 80% of demand.
Okay.
I hope I answered your question, or?
Yeah, pretty well. Do you want to add something, maybe?
Yeah,
Samantha?
I think the finishes, again, that's like another whole conversation in itself. Again, with our grape leather, we're reusing waste from agriculture, so that starts off great, and the process we're working through is great, but then it's the finishes that we come to that are probably not the ones necessarily I'd want to use right now, but that's what's on the market as well. So again, it's all about being realistic about it. The customers we've been spoilt with what's out there in terms of what we can use, how we can wash it, how we can use it. So now that the customer wants that, so we've got to be able to offer in a different way, and again, that would take time. So we're using finishes that, of course, are acceptable for EU legislation, etc., etc. They're fine. But in terms of, do we actually really want them? Not necessarily. So for us, we're going to keep ongoing. So as new products and new research comes onto market, we're collaborating with those people to help us move forward. So it's just something that's going to be an ongoing thing to improve. Like the bacteria dying and things like that, it's fantastic. And I think that, with all these alternatives, what else we've got to do is just not sway in one direction as well, is that we've got to keep really balanced. We don't want everything to suddenly be bacteria dyed, because what happens when it gets into the river streams and things like that. So everything, we've just got to question and question and question and question. And I think we've just got to be really careful about which way we're all going to go. So I think little by little, we're finding lots of different wonderful alternatives, and I think that's really, really nice. So the finishes is a big subject today as well.
And actually, it's also the case in textiles, of course. I think lots of textiles on the market, they have a finish, they have kind of an after treatment which is being applied, and you can use a very sustainable base material, very good fibers and textiles. But if you put an after treatment which is not sustainable, then of course the story is completely different. So we are developing, we are researching to find finishes which are also sustainable, which are also bio-based, and can be combined with the bio-based materials. But it remains a challenge, as you say, to get the properties that you need to get. You can, for example, add a color, but you do not want the color to fade away when you wash it, so it has to be sustainable. So it's a challenge, but it's something we're working on and also trying to get it into the right direction.
Good. So maybe you in the audience already are working on to diversify your sourcing strategies, and maybe you have questions to our speaker. Anyone? Are you using leather alternatives for your brands? Yes?
Good morning, everyone. So first of all, I would like to thank you for this very interesting conference. And I would like to know, please, how do you compute the carbon footprint of your products, please?
So we work with an external third-party laboratory called EVA, which is one of the most, renowned one in Europe. And for all our materials, they compute. They have an internal software. So we provide inputs, and since it's a third-party, they also stand as some kind of validation agency that the final number that comes out of their software is not influenced by us, because we haven't been calculating it ourselves. So EVA, I'm sure there are a lot of other great third-party labs, but to us it's the best.
Okay, and does it use the computation of the GHG protocol, or is it a life cycle analysis?
It's both. It's a life cycle analysis, and they use also standard European regulations in order. For instance, the regulation changes also, and they have to update their software. For instance, I think, if I remember well, in the case of leather, they had recently they had to take into account everything that the cow has eaten and drank, etc., which was not the case prior. So also all those way to make calculations from law is actually monitored by them and integrated into their software.
And when Kering will have finished their work, their research work, in order to ease the digestion of the cows so that they release less methane, they will even have to add this because they will release less methane than they do currently.
Yes, absolutely. This will be taken into account.
Thank you very much.
If I might add to that as well, on the we haven't done any official calculations right now, but we've been looking at what happens to the animal leather industry, and we've been doing it because I guess we're not as far down. We haven't got our whole production line absolutely set in stone right now, but it's always been at the back of our mind. We're taking great waste from X, where I live, around the vineyards near me, drying it. So far, I've been doing it in my back garden, so that's keeping it really, really low. When that gets higher up, bigger quantities, that will be local as well. And then we're manufacturing and producing in Milan, which is closer to me than, let's say, Paris. So just from a kind of dotting on the map point of view, we're keeping it as small as we can in terms of transportation and all of our processes. We're just thinking, is that going to be the right thing? Is that going to be the right thing? So it's constantly being asked as well until the day that we have it more sorted, and then we will absolutely get it down in proper figures.
And maybe I can just add, as being a research center, we are running lots of projects, and I think in each project there is a part on sustainability assessment to make sure that what we are developing, what we are thinking is good, is also really good and from a sustainable point of view. So it's something we always try to consider. Of course, not that easy, because in a research project, you're not working at the industrial scale yet, so you have to make some comparisons to make that clear, but at least we are doing our best to make sure that what we're doing is good.
Okay. Any other question? Yes, please. Can we have the mic?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kathleen. Thank you so much for having this. It's been really, really informative, and I appreciate it. My question is for Lean, actually, because you were speaking about recycled materials. And I personally, myself, I'm a bag designer, and I have pushed for over 10 years to use recycled materials. But in the company I used to work for, we never were able to use recycled materials because they broke down too quickly in terms of durability. And so we had a life cycle analysis that was done. This is over 10 years ago. And it turned out that it was more sustainable to use new virgin nylon as opposed to recycled nylon. So my question is a little bit two-part because that's sort of the preface. Because also for myself, recently I bought a recycled material bag at Maison et Objet or something like this, just to try it out. And the back of it started breaking down within the third time I wore it. And in some of additional research, I guess this is where my question's really going, is that I've understood that the recycled material is really not even coming from all of our fast fashion recycled polyester clothes. It's coming from our water bottles, which also could be used for water bottles. So I just am curious what your research is on this and maybe problem solving around this, because for me, I just don't know what to do with it.
Yes, I can fully understand. I think we have to already consider that there are two types of recycling. We have the mechanical recycling, where we just tear down actually what we have off of the textiles. Mechanical recycling always results in shorter fibers. And if they are becoming too short, then it will be difficult to get a good property material out of it. So this is something you can mechanically recycle, but you have to take into account you cannot do it endlessly. If you do it too much, the fibers will be too short and the properties will be too bad. And next to the mechanical recycling, you also have the chemical recycling routes. And basically there you return to the virgin material. You return to the same material, meaning that you will also have the same properties. You mentioned also about the polyester and the bottles. I think it's a big thing at the moment that if you look to the recycled polyester on the market for textiles, it's mainly bottle-based, which is of course not the goal, and we should not aim for that because bottles should go back to bottles. But at the moment, the polyester recycling, textile to textile, is still something which is in development, and lots of developments are ongoing, and I'm sure we will get there, but we're not yet there, let's say.
I guess that point is maybe not for me or for the panel, but anybody who's here that would be in decision-making processes around marketing, because that's essentially greenwashing. I mean, sometimes the marketing is like, oh, your jacket used to be a plastic bottle, but actually it's more efficient if it just becomes a plastic bottle again, as opposed to you walk into my local grocery store and you have a recycled backpack for 10 euros or something like this, but that's just greenwashing, isn't it? Because
it is. I was actually in the taxi this morning because of an issue with the metro with two Belgian people who were going to an expo on bikes, and I was telling the same, like at the moment there is a lot of greenwashing, like for example with the polyester bottle to bottle recycling, which is not happening because it goes to textiles. And it is something we should try to avoid for sure in future. But yeah, brands are looking for sustainable alternatives. They're not yet there and they cannot wait. They need it for their marketing, so they do it with what's there at the moment.
Yes, but this afternoon we have another roundtable about the evolution of European regulation, and it's something they are really trying to tackle.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that the EU legislation, EU has been really hard on it. I was working with a politician last summer, an MEP, Lisa Lang, who has said quite outrightly, I am coming for the fashion industry. And they really, really are. I mean, it's quite incredible how big the fashion industry is, and yet we've got away with so much. All other industries have been really regulated, and we just haven't. So they're coming for us, and it's happening now. People are getting slammed, fined all over the place. it's frightening as well, because what we've also got to watch that this whole kind of green hushing doesn't work. In fact, people are too scared to say anything. So we've got to really find the balance there, because otherwise everyone's going to go away again, because everyone's going to be worried about getting sued. So got to watch that. One thing I would like to add on as well is the whole social aspect, because just to add a little bit on that as well, because when we're talking about pricing, and you're right, the whole pricing, that's key, because of course there is so much research going on, but also we've got to think about where the research is getting done and how much people are getting paid. And I think I've just come out of a Fashion Revolution Accelerator program with Ursula de Castro, and she quite rightly said last week, actually, that only 20% of those working in the fashion supply chain are earning a living wage, which is kind of outrageous today. So we've got to consider that as well. A lot of the time, the new materials are expensive, but it's also because the materials are way too cheap that are out there. And it goes back to, I know we've all spoken about it, kind of probably, amongst your own friends and things, that if you could buy a T-shirt that's cheaper than your lunch, there's a problem going on. And that's where we've got to. So there's just too much division, and that we've got to add in the whole social aspects and who we're paying and how much they're getting paid. And like right now, we're working in France and Italy, so it's going to be expensive. But I also know exactly who I'm working with. I could call them, I could speak to them, I could visit them, and I think that accounts for a lot as well.
Okay.
Yes. Just to complete what you've said for your question, we have to admit that environmental science are complicated things. It changes, there is a lot of data, we are most of the time not aware of all the data that we have to analyze. So for instance, like 20 years ago, everybody was, Greenpeace guys were in front of nuclear plants, and they were saying, this is evil, we shouldn't let this happen. Now, we hear everywhere that nuclear fusion is what is going to save us all, So the conception about the environment totally shifted in 20 years. So this means that at present we have to stay humble. We don't understand everything yet of environmental science. One thing about recycling materials, which is important, because you said the bag is made with polyester that was recycled from plastic bottles, but we could have used the plastic bottles as new recycling plastic bottles. I was shocked when I realized recently that, aluminum cans, we think, hey, aluminum, it's great, we can recycle it 100%. First, this is wrong. We can recycle it up to 80% if you want to make a new one. But of all aluminum cans that we produce in the world, we recycle 20%. 10% is going for new aluminum cans, and the other 10% is going for streets, the underneath layers of streets. 80% is going to brownfield. So those are super complicated data, and to really master, is it greenwashing or green bullshit, we have to, and pardon my French again, we have to really take it down to the numbers and go through life cycle analysis from cradle to gate and understand if we're on the right track or not.
I think back to the very beginning that you had mentioned in the beginning, Samantha, is to, I'll add in making it cool to buy less and wear longer, right? I don't know if there's marketers anywhere in the audience.
If we do so, we also have to accept to pay the right price of the final product, right? Because we are all stuck in a position where that's the reason why most people in fashion are not paid enough, is because the final consumer doesn't want to pay the right price for fashion products.
I mean, even at the corporate level, there's a huge discrepancy in salary range, because there's a lot being done by interns. I mean, this is a totally different conversation, but
it's not that much. Because it's linked, and we see that the person who are paying the strong amount of debt regarding the environment, they are also paying the social cost of our economical system. So it's linked anyway.
Thank you.
maybe, do we have another question in the audience? No question? Maybe you can add a conclusion, each of you, to this panel conversation. What would be your main expectation for the coming years?
Yes, I think in the textile industry, sustainability is becoming really important. You see it everywhere, so I think things will start to get moving quickly now. Of course, it will still take time, but I also believe that there are really good things going on, and I have some confidence that there will be some changes. Because we have the support of Europe, as you mentioned, Europe is also really pushing towards a more sustainable textile industry, so this will be really helpful.
I'm an optimist, so I would say we have to invest more in new technologies. We have to trust that humans can solve this incredible problem of global warming. I think as European citizens, or as being based in Europe, we have also this responsibility to kind of at least show the way, even if we have less cash than China or the US. But great innovations are coming out of Europe. We have amazing scientists, and I think, yes, we should show the way. But we have to take this to the scientific approach in order to know what we're talking about.
What would you, I'm curious, what would you say to brands who would eventually be afraid to invest in your products?
So this is if the risk for them is investment risk, and as investment, I understand investing in a new product, right? Not investing in the company. It's like, most of them, they usually try something. They launch a capsule, and then, pre-series, capsule in the market, and then larger and larger production. But so most of them are already doing it, and it's not a huge financial risk to launch, like, 30 handbags on the market and do some great marketing around it, if the product is good, obviously. But it's not really a risk. More and more, so luxury companies do it. But what they struggle with is the fact that what they have in their hands as materials is more of a pain to use and transform than alligator, veal leather, etc. So it's going to take time, but if we don't do it now, we will never do it.
So let's start small and go step by step. Thank you. Samantha?
Going on from that, I think that's really key as well, is starting off small, being realistic. And yes, it's great to have the brands on board, but I think it goes back to probably my days being a buyer in London. So much influence came from the street. And I think it's also, that means, in my terms, is the younger independent designers who are sometimes faster and more able to get into these new materials and more willing to try. And I think that's really important. And I sometimes think it can swish around the other way. You get these innovative creatives who are doing it all, and then the brands will see that. And then maybe it'll help them have confidence to see what's happening. So yeah, totally confident that this is going in the right way, but like I kind of said at the beginning, there's so many elements you've got to look at, and it's keeping everything balanced. I think that's a big thing, and just being aware, being conscious about what we're doing as well. So if it does mean buying less, buying better, if it does mean paying the right price, but yes, that might feel expensive, but don't buy as much. All these elements come into it all, but I think what we're doing, and I kind of feel like on the panel as well, is that we're sincerely trying to change things, and it might not be exactly how we want to look at it right now, but we're on a mission to do that. And I think just being genuine and being honest about it, I think that really, really helps as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your contribution to this conversation, and feel free to exchange with our speaker just after the roundtable. Thank you so much.
Thank you.